Hey, welcome to Bifocal. Today is part of our business series, and we're going to be talking about HR, human relations, human resources. We have a guest on today, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Today, as I mentioned, this is part of our business series. And we have a guest on. We have an HR manager on. And I thought it would be interesting to bring an HR person on, especially in light of everything going on with COVID-19 and the remote workforces. What are the changes that have been going on from an HR standpoint? So I have a guest on today. I have Jerrod Workman. Jerrod is the HR manager and controller for Concept. So Jerrod, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So your life, is it changed here with COVID-19?
Yeah, just like everybody else. I believe that change is probably too mild a word, if I'm being very honest. More like completely turned on its head is probably more accurate. I mean, I have a wife. Thankfully, she works in a hospital, so she gets out. So she gets to keep her sanity. But she works in an office down in downtown Cleveland, attached to one of the hospitals. But my kids have been locked up at home. We're on week number 6 now. So they are.
How old are your kids?
I have a 5-year-old, 5 turning 6, 2 turning 3, and then an 18-month-old, and then another one on the way here in the next few weeks. And what we're finding, we're actually it's interesting because we're finding that we're learning more about them. We're spending all this time together. So there's some things that are becoming very clear. I enjoy my kids very much individually. However, when they get together, it is very much like fire and gasoline.
It's cowboys and Indians.
Yeah. So especially my older two, James and John, they have a tendency to egg one another on, and they get into some serious trouble. So, but individually, they're very good kids. You get John by himself, you get James by himself. When you get them together and they get going, that's when the real trouble comes out.
They've been able to get out in the yard and stuff.
Just recently, here in Northeast Ohio, we are kind of beholden to our weather, and this spring has been very cool and very wet. So, and I'm not one to like to shampoo my carpets too much, so we've been keeping the boys inside. Plus, I have my oldest has asthma, and this time of year can be pretty difficult on them. So, when it's nice out like it was earlier today, they were outside playing. But for the most part, they've been inside for most of April.
Yeah. So you work at home primarily right now?
With the state, with the governor of Ohio issuing the stay-at-home orders and the restrictions on business, we've been working. I would say I'm probably 85% at home, and then the balance I have to come to the office, get the mail, do the deposits, that kind of stuff. But majority at home. I have a home office set up, and just what I am finding is that I'm working a lot more than I was, just to keep up with everything from a remote perspective.
Yeah.
So I find myself, I shut it off at 5. I hang out with the kids, until about 8:30, 9 o'clock when they all get to bed, and then I fire everything back up and go to about 1:30 or so.
You have a dual role
Yes.
at Concept. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I started here I started at Concept in 2017, the fall, 3 days after my second son was born, actually, and started here as a director of HR. Came over from a company in Middleburg Heights, which is another company in Northeast Ohio, and was in that role for 9 months or so. And due to some conditions inside the company, moved over and was promoted over to a controllership role, where I took over the financials and kept the HR, and then took on the administrative roles as well. So.
So you got kind of corporate admin, financial, and HR.
Yeah. So from a simplistic perspective, I am the company's representative when it comes to basically the administration and the day-to-day operations of the finances, HR, and just running the business.
So when it came down to you that, hey, we're going to have to send the workforce home, what were some of the concerns you had, not just from a company standpoint, maybe personal standpoint, as well as just an HR viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, there were a litany of things that we considered. while we were looking at this back in mid-March. And to be very candid, this is something that's not new for us. We've actually been piloting and trying to develop some policies for remote work and work from home now this is probably starting at the beginning of 2019. So it's been about 15, 16 months since we actually started working on this. So we weren't completely blindsided by it like a lot of companies were. But there were still considerations with the type of workforce. Previously, when we did any remote work, it was with all exempt employees. And with a group whose work, we did it with our CRM group first. That group does a lot of development work and making sure software works.
It lends itself to being at home.
It's a highly individual type job, so it lends itself to remote work. And that's a group in an industry where that's the norm. Remote work is very, very normal in that group. And so to compete for those individuals to come work at Concept, being as competitive as it is in the Salesforce world, we had to offer that.
So was that a big part of the driving force? Was market pressures?
For that particular role was market pressures, yeah. But because of that, we had a pretty good feel and a pretty good understanding of what it takes to manage a remote workforce. So we knew kind of what the backbones and what the structure needed to look like to be able to manage a remote workforce. I'd be lying to you if I told you we had it built out, because we didn't. And so we worked feverishly back in mid-March to get this rolled out. We went from basically on roughly March the 15th, finally getting the go-ahead to, by the 24th of March, every single one of my employees was working remote. So
what that do from an HR standpoint?
Yeah, so it did a lot. I mean, to actually circle back to the previous point, some of the things we considered with sending non-exempt employees home, so these are hourly employees, need to be paid overtime, so they don't need to have access to their equipment all the time. They don't need, or they can't, rather. So there were a lot of things that we had to consider, from wage hour laws on the HR side to procedures. How do you hire someone? How do you discipline someone? How do you do any of that when you're not in front of them?
From a wage hour, walk me through a little bit. You got hourly employees, and so why now that they're home, why is that an issue from a wage hourly?
Well, so from the reason that's an issue when they're home is because I can't necessarily control when they were working. I didn't have the systems to control it. So whereas when they come to the office, we lock the office, we control their access to the building. So I know that they can only access their computer and their systems while they're here on my premises. When they're at home, I didn't have a system in place to be able to do that, to be able to restrict when they could log into their equipment. And the reason that becomes an issue is because hourly employees by law have to be paid for each and every hour they work. And so to be able to do that, you need to know exactly when they're logging in. In the first week, we had a few hiccups. We had one of our overachievers log in at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night just to get a jump on Monday morning. That was followed by a prompt phone call from me on Monday morning, hey, you can't do that. And so actually a piece of software that we had it's called VMware. And we bought this piece of software to be able to allow us to see that kind of thing. So we can see exactly when people log in, we can see what they're doing on their computers. We can even control access to even specific programs on a computer to certain windows of a day. Okay. So that was one of the big concerns, was controlling access to computers.
So you got that's a brand new variable that you did not have before.
That's correct. So brand new variable there. So and it almost sounds counterintuitive. Well, wait a minute. You want to make sure they don't work too much? Well, we have a commission-based workforce. So they have another driver other than just hours. So they're paid by their performance on their account. And pretty lucratively. I mean, we're talking, it could be $1,000 a month in commission that they could earn. So these people are driven to hit those commission numbers, even working. Some of them would tell you they will work off the clock, and that's not specifically legal to do so. And so that becomes an issue when you have commission and an hourly workforce. They can kind of work counter to one another.
Yeah. How about from processes standpoint and managing tardiness, attendance, and were you set up for that?
Yeah, actually, we had preparing for this for a while, and So at the end of 2019, with this increased flexibility in mind and getting everything onto one platform and being able to bring everything together and manage it cohesively, we switched to something called Paycom. And Paycom is our HRIS, it's our payroll system. It also is now our learning management system. It's our recruiting system, our ATS. So everything is streamlined into one platform.
But you didn't start moving to that because you wanted a remote workforce.
Nope, we moved to it because it had it had everything we needed out of an HRIS and payroll processing system. And we were very impressed with Paycom's processes and everything else that they had built out. However, we did look at it. Because like I told you, this didn't blindside us. Working from home didn't completely blindside us. So we built out the system and we built it to be able to handle this kind of thing. So that was a big decision-making process. And Paycom, the one thing they do have, and I think is better than anybody else, is their app on the telephone, which allows employees to clock in, on their telephone. It also allows me as a manager to go in and manage it on the telephone. And from our research, they're the only company that offers it from the manager side.
And when you say they can log in from their telephone, you're not talking their cell phone.
Yeah, their cell phone.
They can log in from.
Yeah, so they can. It's all secure, so it uses their thumbprint on their phone, just like it does for anything else. Like when you make a payment through Apple Pay or something like that, but they log into Paycom. They can look at all their pay information. They can look at their benefits. They can look at all the information they have pertaining to their employment at Concept in one spot. And with working from home, even now they can clock in using their phone. And so while that might seem to be a little liberal for a lot of companies, when you combine that with the way that we measure their performance, you can see yep, they're clocking in, and yes, they're working right away.
They're not laying in bed and taking their phone and
saying,
Jerrod will never know.
No,
Jerrod will think I'm logged in.
Yeah, and that's it. I have a bulldog.
Jared's home chasing kids.
Yeah.
He doesn't have time to look.
Yeah, my wife chases kids in the morning, thankfully. But no, that's a fair point. And due to my relationship with our production team, and we work very closely together on many things. And our director of production, Jason Weisner, is getting hourly reports sent to him with the activity that people are performing. And so if Jason raises a flag to me, I can say, well, hey, this person is clocked in, so why didn't they make any phone calls in their first hour? So
you got some checks and balances.
Yes, we do. And I have a bulldog and an administrative assistant that nothing slips through the cracks with. So she absolutely does not let anything slip, and she's a blessing. So so have you noticed any difference in attendance or tardiness, good or bad? Any trends starting? Yeah. Just keep in mind, we just completed our first full month of working remote. And throwing out March, because we had half the month home, half the month in the office. Throw out March, we'll go back, we'll look at January and February, and then look at April in its entirety. And actually, absenteeism was down about 30% over in April as compared to January and February. Now, there's a lot to look into there. There's nothing to do, right? So even if they were to call off, where are they going? For those of you listening outside of Ohio, we're on a statewide lockdown. So there's no retailers open. Restaurants are doing delivery. They're closed. Literally nothing's open.
Yep.
So it's not like they can call off and go anywhere. So that's probably a piece of it.
30%.
30% less. And that's across all of our leave types. That's across absence, just unpaid time, which is available for hourly workers. That's PTO. That's any kind of protected leave. All of our absences, flex time, it's down about 30% in April as compared to January and February.
How does that, did you have any expectation or idea of what you thought maybe would happen? Or was that one of those things where it's like, let's just see what happens?
Well, it was kind of both. We thought kind of empirically that we would see it. So we thought that we would see absenteeism drop because we thought basically one of the things that you deal with, especially in this role, this BDM role, is just people that wake up in the morning, they just don't feel like going to work. They get up there, it's like, and I've worked hard. I've done a lot. I've hit my quota. I don't want to.
And
today.
just for people who maybe don't know anything about concept, give a brief description of this hourly workforce that you're talking about. It's primarily one type of job function.
So our hourly workforce is actually they're all one type of job. So we call it the sales development representative, and what they do is their primary role is business development. So they make phone calls, do research all day, that kind of thing. And it can be a job that wears on people. So you get some of that, or at least you suspect it from an HR perspective, right? You suspect that, it's just I just don't really feel like working today.
Well, here's a question for you. Prior to the enforcement that we had to send people home, everybody had to send people home. Was this something Concept was even considering? As from an HR standpoint, would you have recommended a work from home environment?
We were considering it primarily at the drive of several of our senior employees. We do have quite a tenured force of SDRs, and a lot of the ones that have been here 3-4+ years were asking for this as a benefit. They thought they just valued this remote work from home, the flexibility more than a lot of other benefits. And so we had started to entertain it from maybe we can, once you're here 3-4 years, we can make you a senior SDR, right? So you get a little more latitude that comes with that. And so
because you get to know the person a little better.
Exactly. We have, if you don't know somebody,
trustworthy, right? What's their integrity?
Yeah. If you don't know somebody after 3 years, you're going to know what type of worker they are. You're going to know what their integrity is. You're going to know what their attendance patterns are. You're going to know what their performance patterns are. So you have a really good feel for somebody after several years. Now, you can't have that feel with somebody after 90 days. And so we had previously talked about allowing our senior people to do that. So it wasn't just completely out of nowhere. So it wasn't just like a new thing. And then this presented itself. And frankly, our senior leadership group got together and we said, hey, we can basically treat this as a big pilot. And that's what we're doing. So because this is something that we'd heard several times from our workforce that, hey, we're interested in this. Well, we basically had a situation present itself where we could evaluate this, even though it's not really our choice to be home, but we could still evaluate this to see if this is a reasonable or something that could even be a permanent solution for us down the road.
What are you hearing from employees? What are they telling you?
Overwhelmingly positive. As a matter of fact, we did a survey several weeks ago, and 87% favorable for work from home as far as they prefer to working at the office. So there are a few people who like to come into the office. I'm actually one of those. I actually like coming to the office. I live about 20 minutes away.
It's because you get Cowboys and Indians.
That's because I do. I got Remember the Titans. I got Cowboys and Indians. I mean, I tell you, they're hooked on Little Giants right now. And they're all about it. This morning I was in the other room and they kept rewinding the scene where the football gets stuck in the face mask. They thought that was the funniest thing in the world.
So you like to come into the office. That'd be your preference.
I do. And if I'm being candid, I like the idea of having the flexibility to say, hey, Jeff, I got somebody coming to the house. I need to work from home today. And I do have that now. I had that before, right? I could make a phone call to Jeff, and that's something that Jeff's my day-to-day manager. He's the president of Concept.
Okay, that's who you directly report to.
Yeah, so I directly report to on a day-to-day basis.
So you'd like the flexibility, but you would prefer.
Yep. I mean, literally probably most days, 5 out of 5 days, especially when my wife is home with the kids specifically. Because right now we haven't been taking them to the nanny or anything like that. So when the kids are there, it's very difficult because when you have 3 boys that can walk, we call it they launch an assault. So it's like they get together and they just overrun my wife, and then they get into my workspace, and it affects my productivity because I got to stop what I'm doing. And generally speaking, they do it when I'm on the phone because they want to know. They hear I'm talking to someone. They want to know who I'm talking to.
Who's Dad talking?
Yeah, who's Dad talking to? So they mount this like all out offensive to get into where I am, and my wife is just hopeless, right? Because you get a almost 6-year-old. My 6-year-old
like wolves. They come from all angles.
They do, yeah. And they plan it out, and you could see them planning it, right? Because James will come from one angle, and John will come from the other angle, and then it just and she can't stop him. And God bless her, but it just they launch these little offensives, and I'm not a huge fan. I don't like being interrupted while I'm working. That's just the way my mind kind of works. So I would prefer to work from home. If my kids weren't home, I'd like to work. I could work at home, but right now with being home,
Yeah.
I don't have an option for them.
I'm that way.
Yeah.
I would prefer to get up. I'm a very much a morning routine guy, and I'd rather come to office as well.
And I like my drive. I drive every day through the Cuyahoga National Forest, so it's actually a really pretty drive. And like I said, I live about 20 minutes away, so I'm not on the interstate. I'm not sitting in traffic. I'm driving down back roads. It's a nice drive home, and it's just the right length to where I can decompress on my way home, and then I'm ready for my kids when I get out of my car.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but that's kind of the way my mind works. So I can.
Well, you mentioned you did a survey, and it was positive. What were some of the things you asked on your survey?
We asked several things. We asked about the technology. How would they rate our technology? We asked, did they prefer working from home as opposed to working in the office? We asked them to rate their productivity at home, which actually was the lowest ranking score on the survey. So we asked them to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10, and the average score on productivity was a 7.5.
And that 7.5 is their impression of how productive they think they are.
That's correct. So
then you get production and reports on the back end that show real activity.
That's right. And so they rate that as a 7.5.
But how would that number compare in their impression if they rated themselves in the office? Did you have that comparison?
We have not. I've had some kind of I've had some conversations with BDMs kind of off the cuff, and one of the things that's being reported back consistently is there's way less interruption for them. Because one of the things here at the office, the way our office is designed, there's a lot of cubes in a space, and so there's a lot of opportunity for interruption. There's a lot of opportunity for people getting up out of their chairs, going and saying, hey, get some coffee, going into the lunchroom, all that stuff. So there's a lot of opportunity for interruption, and even from managers, right? So you walk around, you do your morning walk around, hey, how you doing? Shake hands and all that stuff. So there is a lot of opportunity for interruption, which doesn't really exist in the home workspace. So, but from a stats perspective, like our call volume's up 10% month over month. It might not sound like much, but across the board, right? So even call it flat or up a little bit. What that means is that my people are at least as productive as they are in the office at home. Yeah. So if that was a big concern, I think through the first month or first 6 weeks or so, they've answered that hey, we're still working while we're at home.
How, from an HR standpoint, how would you know if they're happy, satisfied, unsatisfied? I mean, that's got to be tough right now.
It is. It is. It's also, I don't want to underscore how tough that is to know while they're in the office also. And a lot of people put on that game face. They come to the office and they don't want anybody to know they're upset. Some people are terrible at hiding it, and they wear their emotions on their sleeves. But others are pretty good at it, making sure that you don't know how they're feeling. I mean, there's been, and what I'll use as an example is there's been several times throughout my career that people have resigned, and I've been completely blindsided by it. And then they tell me, hey, they're not happy here. Or, they found
you
something.
see them every day.
Yeah, and I see them every day, and you have these jovial conversations, and then all of a sudden you get a resignation. Hey, I hated it here. And you're just like, I mean, so to be fair, that's a very difficult thing to track even in person. What I will say is there's been a much more concerted effort since everybody's been at home by me, by the management team, by everybody to stay in front of people. We've been, Jeff, the president of the company, put that as a priority when we first started. And we were making videos. Each one of us had a responsibility every day to make a video to get out and stay in front of the company. And Jeff has continued to do that to make sure everybody's abreast of things that are going on. And then from that point on, I know like on the production side, Jason Weiser and his group, they have these morning coffee meetings. So they take 5-10 minutes and they get on Teams and they just talk. It's not about work. It doesn't have to be about work. It's just, hey, get a cup of coffee. Because
Teams is Microsoft Teams technology platform.
Yeah, that's right, Microsoft Teams. So it's a video conferencing or conference platform that we leverage here at Concept. So
how's it changed for you and your peers?
Mm-hmm. Well, our meetings now, one thing I've noticed is that they're very, very much more pointed, and they're very much there's not a lot of fluff in them anymore. So whereas you get in the office and you get comfortable around people, and some of that the first 10-15 minutes of a meeting, you can basically waste it, right, telling stories or whatever. But now that seems to be cut way down. And that's an empirical evidence.
Why do you think that is?
I just think that people are, they're focused on their work, or they just don't want to be bothered. They don't like the video conferencing.
Well, I know for me, I don't catch myself small talking as much. And part of the reason is if I video conference somebody, I feel like I'm walking into their house.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little bit more reserved to what I'm doing. It's like, I'm not going to wear out my welcome. I probably interrupted you. Okay. Even though they may work for me.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But and so you kind of feel like I'm going to get to the point.
Yep.
I called and interrupted you, and then you get off.
No, and we're seeing that. So our meetings are shorter. We're getting to the point, we're getting our work done, and we're getting back at it. A lot more communication. Like I said before, we had a lot of platforms in place that allow very quick communication, even inside of Salesforce with Chatter. And then with Teams also has a chat feature where you can, instead of sitting down and writing an email, you can just fire off a question to somebody and get a really quick response back, generally speaking.
So are you finding yourself now in this remote work environment, you're doing a lot more via Teams than email?
Teams and the Chatter. Yeah. Between Chatter on Salesforce and Teams. If I have a project specific question, I'll chatter on that project to the person I need the question for. And that way we keep that record on the actual project.
How do you see technology now?
It's our backbone. To put it, and that's probably even putting it lightly. Without it, Concept actually couldn't function. For example, if you came to me tomorrow and said, Jerrod, we have to shut down Salesforce, we have to shut down Microsoft, and I'd just be, okay, well then you're shutting down the company. There's no way around it at this point. We're so far ingrained to those pieces of technology that there's nothing that we could do to get away from them.
It's water.
Yeah, it is.
It's air and water.
It is, and to Concept, that was the idea. Is we are a tech heavy company, so we are using the latest platforms, the latest technology to do the work. And the idea there is to leverage technology, lessen manpower needed to do something. And that's a driver across all of our functions. It's not just one function. That's something we're looking at across production to CRM to marketing.
So when do you know? I mean, at some point, the governor is going to say, hey, you can open up. Mm-hmm. You can come back. If I said, Jerrod, the decision is yours, right? The president comes to you and says, hey, Jerrod, we're all looking to you right now, and we can all come back to work. What do you say?
Very candidly, I'm not interested in bringing anybody back to this office until I get an all clear. The Ohio Department of Health, along with OSHA, has issued requirements that if we're going to bring people back, we got to supply masks. We have to step up our cleaning, and it just is not conducive to getting back to work. And what that really tells me is it's really not safe to be back in the workplace yet. So if they're saying that we have to provide masks, we have to do all this stuff, really what they're saying is we really think you should stay home. And the state of Ohio has actually done a really good job there. And they've come out very candidly and said, yes, you're allowed to be open. Your office is allowed to be open. But if you can work remote, we highly suggest that you work remote. And that's been the guidance that we've received. So we're still in that kind of a semi-lockdown stage, and we'll be there for the foreseeable future. I don't see it ending anytime before the end of the second quarter, and probably most of the third quarter.
I think one of the unknowns, and you kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, is productivity. You mentioned productivity's up. People like it. The survey was good, but there's nothing else for them to do. What do you think's going to happen when the green light goes on and they're allowed to get out a little bit more, and not just Concept, but in general? How much of what companies are, like I talk to a lot of companies, and there's some companies that are saying, I can't wait to get back to work. Our productivity is down. This isn't good. I got to get back. You're sitting back saying, fortunately, this has actually been pretty good for us. How do you know you're not in a honeymoon phase?
Well, to be very candid, we don't. And one of the things we did when we piloted this program with CRM last year is we set up checkpoints at 3 and 6 months just to see if things were going the way we anticipated them going. And so through 1 month, I can sit here and tell you very wholeheartedly that I am not willing to hang my hat on anything that we've seen so far. All I can tell you is what we've seen. This is what we're seeing as of today, if you were to check back with me in 30, 60, 90 days, I'm starting to feel more comfortable with what I'm seeing. So if I'm seeing a trend that we're making more phone calls, if I'm seeing a trend that we're closing more business, if I'm seeing a trend that absenteeism stays down over the long term as we go into the summer months, especially, I'm going to have to sit back and really think about, is this even something we want to do? Do I want to lose? I mean, because when you're talking about as many employees as we have, decreasing absenteeism by 30%, that's 80 to 100 hours a month of productive time that I could get.
Big.
That's real dollars, that are affecting my bottom line. So it's going to be hard for me to justify if these trends hold. It's hard to say, well, hey, we got to bring everybody back to the office.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. But right now, we have a month of data, and I can't stress that enough. I have one complete month of data. That's it. Anybody that could tell you they're going to make a decision off of 1 month of data doesn't know a whole lot about data.
Yeah. So how have you handled the? I'm assuming you've had some layoffs, right, like everyone else, and now with the stimulus and so forth. Not sure how all that's affected you, but maybe you brought some people back. Walk me through a little bit of how you just administered some of that remotely.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely posed a challenge. I am not obviously we've had layoffs. Like you mentioned, at one point we'd laid off almost 30% of our staff globally across the company, and we did that not because we just wanted to lay people off, but because our customers were basically coming back to us and saying, "Hey, there's no work for you to do for us right now." So we had no choice, and those are conversations you hate to have. But what we did and what I had to do is I would call. I actually made the physical calls. I can't call them into the office to do it. I can't face them face to face. Big believer that if you're going to make the decision to do something, you should do it yourself. So when we made the decision to lay them off, I personally made all those phone calls. Some of the worst phone calls I've had to make because these are people that rely on Concept for their livelihood. And unfortunately, that duty falls to me. And most of these people, and actually I should say 99.9% of them, did nothing wrong. The only thing, they had a bad stroke of luck and their project canceled. I mean, that was one of the defining factors. If your project's canceled, and we didn't have work for you, we didn't want to reassign you to another project. We didn't want to be the ones calling a customer to say, "Hey, we're going to switch the BDM out," and then have them say, "Oh, well, let's just go ahead and pause for right now." So that was, we wanted to swap that.
So you call them and you let them know, and
yep. And so what we did is we called and have a conversation with them and let them know, hey, we have to lay you off here at the end of the day. Walk through all the details as far as what it meant, the recall list. Make sure they understood it wasn't for performance. Make sure they understood it was a layoff, that they were being placed on a recall list, and then walk them through even going and filing for unemployment. In Ohio, at least, we have a special unemployment category for coronavirus. Gave them a document that actually walked them through how to file and make sure they got their money quicker from the unemployment office. So we did everything we could, and then I actually give them my personal numbers, and just to make sure that they can continue to reach me if they need anything.
And then how about, have you called anybody back?
Yeah, we actually 2 weeks ago we received our approval for Karis Funding. And under the Karis Funding, we immediately called back 15 employees. Literally, we got the funding on a Thursday. That Friday, we called back 15 employees. So we did exactly what we were, instructed to do via the CARES Act.
So 24 hours earlier, they brought their stuff in, and 24 hours later, they come and pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we had laid people off that Monday because prior to that, and with the CARES Act, we didn't know we were getting the funds until the day before. So we and just being good stewards of the business, myself and Jeff had made the decision that, hey, we're just going to run this thing as if we're not getting the money. And so as soon as a project would leave, we'd have to do layoffs and downsize and reorganize. And we were getting to a point where it was getting really difficult and to do without, digging into some deeper cuts. And we were on the verge of making some deeper cuts, and got the call on Wednesday that, hey, your loan's been approved. You'll get your money within 24 hours. And we were like, okay, well then we're going to go ahead. We're going to reverse course here. We're going to bring back the last 15 people we laid off. And we did that, and we put them back to work here in the interim, doing proactive things for Concept. So put them on our sales team, put them on other projects that may have been struggling, things like that. So just to put them back to work.
Yeah. How do you think, looking forward, how do you think COVID-19 has changed the work environment moving forward?
You know, I've done a little reading on this, and the last pandemic that we dealt with that was anywhere close to this was the flu pandemic, right? 1918. You probably heard that reference several times in the news, and that pandemic changed the United States. They didn't call it social distancing back then, but in effect, that made that very permanent, to the point where, you know, families had very little contact with the outside world. If they could do it, they stuck to their nuclear families, and just, you know, mom, dad, kids, grandparents, that kind of deal. They weren't doing a lot of going out in public and socializing as we're used to now in 2020, right? It's all about the picture in 2020 that people can get for their social media, and I think you're going to see a lot of that reverse, because now that picture gets you scrutinized online. Well, what are you doing out, right? I mean, you're the problem. I mean, what's your deal?
Yeah.
Why aren't you wearing a mask?
Better be careful what you're posting.
Exactly. You got to be very careful what you're posting. So I think that's gonna change that. It's gonna change. I think honestly, what this is going to cause, because it's not just COVID. In the world we live in, COVID is just the most recent threat that we face. You know, at any point in time, any virus can make the jump. And regardless of where it's from and who's to blame, what this did show was the way society worked, at least here in the United States, was not really conducive to stopping a virus. So I think what you're going to see, work from home become more prevalent than it's ever been. I think you're going to see companies that want to downsize any space that they have. Very much in like one of the big things I've been talking about with a lot of my peers is retail. Retail's already been on its last legs for several years, and I think COVID might be the dagger that ends retail as we know it. Give you an example. Yesterday I bought a new fishing rod. Big fisherman. I like to go to the store to buy a fishing rod because you like to feel them. You know, you want to feel the action and you want to feel the reel and all that stuff. Actually talking to a local shop, they were willing to FedEx me 4 different reels and let me pick which reel I wanted. So I gave them my card as a deposit, and they FedEx me 4. They're going to get them tomorrow. They FedEx me 4 reels for me to feel and touch and see which one I liked in order to buy one. And now these aren't $25 reels. Yeah. Right. But still.
They paying the shipping?
No, I have to pay the shipping. But I'm getting 4 high-end reels sent to my house, and I haven't paid for them yet. I gave them my card number. Yeah. But I think, you know, other than maybe going into a place as a showroom to see something, but I think shipping and final mile logistics is going to be
Well, I think Amazon kind of set the stage, right?
Yeah, retail was already on its last legs, like I said, right? Yeah. Amazon has changed.
So we were all geared up for it. Mm-hmm. Now it's just kind of went over the top a little bit.
Yeah, but even Amazon's admitting they're overrun, right? They don't have the staff. I mean, they've come out recently in the last couple of weeks and said that, you know, their Prime delivery, they're going to be slowing that down because they have too many orders. You know, sitting in my house, my office looks out the front window, and I can't tell you how many times I see a Prime truck or a FedEx truck or a UPS truck in a day. I mean, it seems like they're just constantly.
But you're not getting stuff the next day anymore.
No, you're not. I mean, you can if you want to pay out. I mean, I had the option. I'll use these reels again. I had the option to ship them overnight for like $74, and I was like, no, I'll take them 2-day, please. I'll pay the $20 and I'll have them 2-day. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I think this will be the dagger in retail. Yeah. I honestly do. I mean, obviously you got to go places to buy clothes and stuff like that you have to go and try on and see if you like them.
Well, I think like you, I think a lot of companies, they've got the taste by force of this remote workforce.
Not just them though. It's the employees.
Yeah.
And I think when you're thinking about your company, you have to think about your employees, right? Because your employees are your company. We're just that intermediary between our customers and the employees.
So now you're in the HR side, right? So now let's take 12 months from now. let's say we're totally through it, everyone's comfortable. But now where you had maybe, and these aren't real numbers, these are fictitious, but you had 10% of the workforce that worked from home.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got 70% of the workforce that works from home. If you don't offer work from home, you've probably really limited your workforce.
Yeah, I mean, you're Neanderthal when Homo sapien came around, right? All of a sudden, there's a new, better way to do things, and
so how do you? Yeah, you're limited on your workforce. That's going to change operational things now.
Yeah, and I think from an HR perspective, there's something that we reference called the employer of choice, meaning that in our field, in our area, we're the one that people want to come work for. So think of it as like a Google, right? So Google's the employer of choice in their field, Apple, right? So you always try and shoot for that kind of high level of respect in the field. And so even if you want to think about being employer of choice, I think remote work has to be kind of a foundation.
Now, on the flip side, the whole workforce opens up now too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go hire people on the East Coast, West Coast.
It does. I mean, now to be very candid, like I'll use Ohio. We're in Northeast Ohio. But I'm already set up to pay taxes in Ohio. I'm already set up to employ people in Ohio. My workforce went from the 4 million people here in Northeast Ohio that live here. And granted, I know all 4 million can't work, but there's 4 million people in Northeast Ohio. There's 11 million people that live in Ohio, right? So I know that now, all of a sudden, if I go remote, my workforce has almost tripled in size, or my potential workforce has tripled in size. And so what that means for me is we had issues. I mean, in full transparency, we had issues staffing this job for a long time last year. The market was so competitive for this kind of work that we'd hire somebody, get them trained. No sooner we get them trained up, somebody would come out and poach them from underneath us. But that's the nature of the free market. But opening it up to that size of a footprint to be able to employ people across the state of Ohio. That alone triples my workforce. Not to mention, we're set up. We have employees in the state of Texas. I'm already set up in the state of Texas, right? And we have a need for Spanish speakers, just across our projects, right? And the pure stats say there are many more Spanish speakers in Texas than there are in Ohio. It's just a fact. Yep. So, I mean, it opens up my possibilities. It opens up my potential workforce, or my talent pool, I should say. It opens up my talent pool, those are all good things. For
even from a recruiting standpoint, it changes. You should have bought Zoom stock in Zoom.
I don't know about that.
60 days ago.
I would probably take stock in Microsoft because Zoom got in a whole lot of trouble for spying on people's meetings.
Well, spying on, or people were hacking in?
Whatever it was, there was a glitch in Zoom software.
Yeah. But still, everyone's using it.
Still, everybody's using Zoom. We're using Teams because we're on the Office platform.
But from a recruiting standpoint, now you're probably going to have more video recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, we had beginning of March 1st, we actually had suspended in-person interviews already, so we weren't actually bringing anybody in the office prior to going remote when we still had our employees in the office. So I think you're going to see a huge uptick in basically what we do, the video interview, the teleconference interview, and there's good and bad to that. The bad is you don't get that. You call it the handshake, right? You don't get to look that person in the eye.
Yeah, you're not allowed to shake hands anymore. Anyways.
Yeah, that's true. You give them the old elbow. It's going to be difficult. Especially kind of from the old school recruiting. You look them in the eye and you kind of get a feel for what the person sitting across from you is. Are they an average Joe? Are they putting on a front? Are they, what am I sitting here with? What am I going to employ? So you lose that. Yep. What'll be interesting is one of the things you can do with teleconference is you could potentially increase your touch points. So all of a sudden a recruiter can talk to them, maybe a manager, a first line supervisor could talk to them. So you can get, with the tech, you could really open it up, maybe get more touch points on someone, which might erase some of the negatives.
You think the office settings are going to change?
Yeah. I do big time. I think one, you're going to lose a lot of communal settings. I think that'll be primarily at the urging of the states. and the federal government and OSHA and things like that. OSHA's, putting out regulations, the state of Ohio's putting out regulations that I should sanitize my kitchen several times a day.
Although I heard yesterday 2 doctors talking that the human, now I'm not a doctor, but they're saying the human body is designed to handle bacteria. We have good bacteria and bad bacteria, and they said, by wiping your countertops down all the time and washing your hands all the time, we're actually weakening our immune system.
Yep. Yeah, and that's, I've read that exact same thing. And the thing that we do in our house is anything that comes outside of the house to inside of the house needs to be disinfected and cleaned. Once we're inside of the house, the measures go way down, right?
It's controlled.
It is. It's a controlled environment. So, we even go to the extent of we sanitize our groceries. I know that might sound weird, but having a kid that's got already a breathing problem.
Wife.
I got a pregnant wife, and I got a kid that has a breathing issue. My 5-year-old, like I said, has asthma. So just playing it safe. We literally Clorox wipe everything I buy at the store. So it sits in the back of my car, and we unpack it in the back of my car, wipe everything down, walk it inside. And so our house is controlled. We take our shoes off outside. My wife, like I said, she works in a hospital. She goes into my mud room every night, and she changes clothes in the mud room, goes up and showers every evening when she gets home. So we take it a little further than a lot of families are taking it. Sure. But we also have a little bit more of a risk.
Sure. Sure. So as an HR manager, what do you think? Is this up to this point? Is it going anywhere good? Has there been anything positive from this up to this point? There's obviously been a lot of negative. Anything positive from an HR standpoint that you think's come out of this?
Yeah, there's always positive. There's positive in anything. It's just a matter of perspective. And what I will say, the thing that I'm encouraged by is the spirit of the people that are working here, that work for me, work for Concept. Because even though they're work from home, you can tell they're battling through some things, even socially, physically, mentally, that kind of thing. They're still in high spirits. They still want to be part of something. They still want to be part of Concept. As a matter of fact, I got a phone call this morning asking if I had a problem with them organizing a parking lot picnic, a social distance picnic. So where they come in, you sit in your car, you open your tailgate up, and you sit there and you eat, and everybody stays in their car and eats their lunch, but you can have a conversation or just hang out together. So,
was Concept prior to this remote workforce? Was Concept big into social stuff and getting the employees together?
Yeah, actually, at the beginning of 2020, to increase that buy-in and to increase that engagement and really bolster some culture, at the direction of our president, we put that on my plate. And I am not I don't want to say this and be nice about it. I am not a social guy. I have a very tight nucleus of people that I keep around me.
That's a good characteristic for an HR manager.
Yeah. It is and it isn't. Because what I tell people is, yes, I'm not this real soft, fluffy HR guy. But I can't be, due to the nature of my job and my responsibilities. I have to keep my distance because I have to be able to stay objective, right? I have to be able to.
You can't get attached.
I can't get attached to people. So I make it a point. I don't go out to lunch with other employees. I don't socialize. I don't go out and have drinks. Yes, I go to the Christmas party and do all the stuff that we do from a company, but outside of work, I keep my work life very much separate from my personal life. So I have my personal nucleus of friends and I have my work.
So how does a company create that community? Mm-hmm. You hire a new employee tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Hey, thanks for coming in. Go sit up in your bedroom, and you don't know whether you're any different working for Concept or ABC Company.
Yep. And so what we did is recognizing that. I established what we call an events committee, and that committee is responsible for planning all the social events inside of Concept. And on top of that, they also we have a group that welcomes new employees, and we have the employees run that. They take a lot of pride in that. The people that do that take a lot of pride in doing that, welcoming new employees to the point where, they call them, or we haven't had any new employees yet. With this COVID-19, with the layoffs, we haven't done any hiring. As a matter of fact, we paused all hiring. So we're completely shut down on the hiring front. So we haven't dealt with this yet inside of the lockdown. So it's hard for me to say that. But prior to the lockdown, we had groups of employees that were coming to the front door and walking new employees back every morning, having a conversation. Hey, how you doing? How's training going? You liking it so far? That kind of thing. Just making them, trying to get them up to speed and to be part of the Concept family as quick as we could. And because you could lose somebody really quickly, and we wanted to avoid that. So we were already working that stuff. Now we have to convert that. If we ever get to a point where we're hiring people, which I know it's like a pipe dream right now. I still have several employees in layoff status, and who knows what the future holds with anything going on here with the economic data that's coming out now. But assuming we get back to a point where we're hiring people back, we have to solve for that.
Yeah,
we don't know what that looks like.
But you're not alone.
No, we're not.
Everyone's going to be solving for that.
Yeah, I mean, and we're not alone there. Thankfully, our work is conducive. What we do is conducive to telecommuting and working remote. We're not making widgets.
Yeah.
So that's something we do have going for us.
Every company has its own set of unique problems,
and that's the thing. If somebody listening has something that they hear from me that makes them think about something a different way, that's fantastic. But Concept has its own problems, and every company has its own problems.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as
they're not a playbook, right?
There's not. You go to school and you learn this stuff and you get experience, and what you find out after learning everything is there is no substitute for experience.
Yeah.
And I think right now, we're getting a little bit of a lesson in basically, you go ahead and try and plan it. And
Wednesday it'll change.
Yeah, there's been several times where Monday we had one idea, Wednesday we had another idea, and Friday we were throwing them both away. So we've had several of those circumstances. Yeah. So it's definitely been an interesting time. Information's been coming fast, and it's changing almost daily.
Do you like the change? Are you a kind of guy that likes challenge and change?
I thrive on challenge. I like to solve problems. I'm a big time reader. Some would call me a nerd or a dork or whatever. I don't particularly care, but I do enjoy reading. But one of the things I do like doing is solving problems. And even if I can't solve a problem, I also like to share ideas. So I'll put ideas out there that might seem off the wall for no other purpose than just to see what people think about them. And even if it's a really terrible idea, someone else might be just all of a sudden they're spurred by that, and a great idea comes out of it.
So parts of this has been okay because it's been challenging for you.
It has. Well, from a personal perspective, I like the challenge. So to be very candid, if I wasn't challenged in my work, I wouldn't be at Concept. So I need that challenge. That's what keeps me going. Probably more than anything else is. And right now that challenge is changing every day.
Sure.
I'm facing something on Tuesday that I'm facing something completely different on Thursday. So we get after it is all I can say.
Yeah.
And a lot of my time is spent keeping up with Jeff. He's moving fast, and we have a lot of things in the works that are moving, and between doing my normal duties and keeping up with him, that's
You're keeping busy.
Yeah. Busy's not the problem.
So you're an Ohio guy.
I am Ohio through and through. So never lived anywhere else. I am out of Central Ohio. Originally, Ohio State ties in the family and all that stuff, and then.
So you're a Buckeye fan.
Oh yeah, big time.
I brought that in just for you. I thought maybe you'd enjoy that.
I do very much. My cheeks are probably turning as red, scarlet red right now. But
I had to bring. I knew you were a big Buckeye fan.
Yeah.
I did. So you got roots with the Buckeyes?
I do. I love Ohio State football. I have since I was a kid. If I'm being very candid, I wasn't a huge fan of Jim Tressel. I know that's probably not popular with Ohio State guys. With the Ohio State fans in general, I don't do conservative. And I thought watching Jim Tressel Ohio State football.
So you liked Urban Meyer?
I loved Urban, but Urban's game plan was, I'm going to out-athlete you. I'm going to recruit better. We're going to be better. And I'm just going to flat out athlete you. I can run dive or zone or anything, and we're just better. So I'm going to win. And that works for 95% of the games. The problem is that also lends to the unexpected blowout, and that's what plagued Urban at Ohio State. So, Purdue and Iowa and those games come to mind, and Virginia Tech in 2013, and so those games come to mind.
You're a kind of a real connoisseur of sports and stats.
Well, it comes. I probably get that from my dad. My dad and my brother. We're all like that. It's just the way we were raised. So, what I say to people is my vice is sports. So, especially like football and baseball are probably the two biggest ones. Been recently getting into hockey more and more since the Blue Jackets have been good. Over the last several years, the Blue Jackets have been really competitive. So it's been nice to see a team that I have local ties to out of Columbus. So, but primarily football. Big time Cleveland Browns fan. Big Ohio State fan. I could talk for the rest of the afternoon. It's 3:00. I could easily talk.
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. One is I'd like to thank you for coming on the show today, and but two, I would love to bring you back, especially as college football hopefully begins.
Hopefully is a big one.
Hopefully begins to gear up. Would love to bring you back and have you share some thoughts on Ohio State and kind of what your views are and maybe some forecasts for the season. And
yeah, I'd be happy to give some limitations to University of Michigan. I feel bad. Feel bad for them at this point. We're going on to the point where it's I think it's 17 of the last 19 games Ohio State's won. So hasn't been a great stretch for the old Skunk Bears up there in Michigan, but it actually is to the point now where it's not just I want to beat them every year. It's now like I genuinely am feeling sorry for Michigan because I don't care how much you hate a team. They don't deserve 20 years of mediocrity.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I have an interesting perspective on that because I'm a Browns fan and I've known nothing but.
So you've experienced that.
Yeah. So I've experienced what Michigan football has experienced on the professional side.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the Browns have been listless now since 1999. So thankfully, I have Ohio State football, and they're experiencing a run over the last, 20 years or so that's just unprecedented, even inside of Ohio State football, aside from the late 60s, 70s with Woody Hayes, where, in 1968, one of the sports reporters very famously said the best game in the country is a full pad practice on Tuesday between Ohio State's number one offense and number one defense. So outside of that era, I think that Ohio State's, and I don't take it for granted, they're at an all-time high when it comes to the program. And I think Ryan Day down there is doing a heck of a job in recruiting. Right now they have the number one rated class for 2021. This class they just brought in this last year was top 5 rated. They're just outclassing the rest of the Big Ten right now.
Well, hopefully we get to play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that we will, and I think it's actually going to come down to the business side of it. 90% of the revenue in college football is TV.
Yeah,
and I don't think that when it comes down to it, the big time universities that rely on football and those TV rights for football are going to let those slip away. Because Ohio State's bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's good for the cities. It's good for the
it's good for the universities.
It's everything.
It's a major revenue stream for the universities. Those TV rights, especially for the Big Ten and for Ohio State, are just incredible. And that goes across the SEC and ACC, all the big time, the TV rights. And we might be playing without fans, or we might be playing with half capacity fans. I think that's something we need to prepare for. But as of right now, I don't know that I see a fall without football. I mean, they're talking about baseball starting up July 1. I've been hearing the reports of. So excited to get baseball back. It doesn't even feel like spring right now, in my opinion, because there's no baseball. I'm excited to get baseball back. Go Reds! I'm a Reds fan out of Columbus. So hopefully the Reds return here, and because Joseph Daniel Votto is not getting any younger, and hopefully.
Well, Jerrod, if people wanted to reach out to you, how can they contact you?
Well, you can call the office 330-336-2571, or you can get me by email. Best email is just my name, or my first initial last name, jworkman@conceptltd.com.
Very good. Well, hey, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your insight. Thanks for some of the things you've shared. Thank you for tuning in. And if you like shows like this, hit subscribe. We have more shows like this coming. We want to thank you for tuning in today. And as Jerrod said, if you got a question for Jerrod, you got an HR question, by all means, feel free to reach out to him, Workman at conceptltd.com. Thanks again. Tune back. Talk to you later.